Hey guys, Gaza TV here with another Diablo 4 video content on this channel. I do apologize for the way I look. I'm currently running a subathon and we have been live for the past 55 hours and it's hitting my energy levels right now pretty goddamn hard. So I'm going to keep this video rather short and I wanted to talk about my first impressions of Diablo 4 Early Access, which currently only has access to the Barbarian, Rogue, and the Sorcerer class. Now, for me personally, when it comes to the Diablo franchise, I've always been a big fan of playing Druid or Necromancer, specifically in the Summoner genre, obviously. However, those are not available till next weekend. So, my first impressions have been both positive and negative, and I'd like to tackle a couple of expectation topics first, which I'm sure a lot of people seem to have missed the point on and are rather upset or very happy with, and might be disappointed later or just very happy later as well. And I want to point that out, and that is the fact that Diablo 4 is not a purebred ARPG game, but rather so it is a MMO ARPG game. It feels so far more like an MMORPG game with the way I've seen it be played. And it also comes into having rather limited types of character specialization or customization in terms of the skills in the beta access. This is one of the parts I can't really provide too much feedback on, positive or negative, because I feel like a lot of the skills and optimizations and design around your build is based around legendary powers. These would be in the form of aspects. So here's an example of such a thing, whereas there is an Avalanche. This is a key passive in your skill tree for the sorceress, would apply to one more additional cast. This is found on the skill tree all the way in the bottom over here, which makes it, it's a bunch of effects happening from this specific node. This is a rather big impact, this specific aspect. This is a massive change or a bonus to that specific node on the tree. But we're not going to get there, not with the current iteration of the beta and the early access. So therefore, I'm unable to test this for that specific type of build. This means that it's very hard for me to decide builds in the current state of the game, or verify the efficiency of it, or even talk about things like build diversity. Obviously, it seems to be a lot of diversity because of the vast amount of different things you can do, as legendary itemizations is basically deciding the way your build is played. Here's another option of those, whereas there's a % increased critical strike chance against injured enemies while you are healthy. And if you want to have more information about this, you can check that out. But there's like tons of them. For example, this is an imprinted version, which is basically me taking the legendary power away from a legendary item, and then applying that legendary power, which is an aspect such as this item, onto a rare item, which creates a legendary version of it. In this case, it is my Runic Skull Cap of the Protector, whereas the imprinted modifier is from a legendary item, but the other stats is actually a rare generic item that I had. So that's a really cool system in terms of crafting or deciding your build through this, and you can move this around to other pieces later if you will. But it also means that designing your character in the early stages basically means that you're playing something that's rather generic, that doesn't need any of these effects. And then in the end game, you're essentially looking to find a specific legendary power, or maybe a couple, and then getting the ones that you need for your build, and then applying them to your gear piece to create the actual final build product. I really like the idea of that, so I'm very looking forward to trying that out once we get more access on the full release, of course. Outside of that, there's the generic approach of enchanting gear, which is exactly like it was back in Diablo 3, for example, where you are able to re-roll your gear modifier, or at least one of those modifiers can be re-rolled at the vendor. So in this case, you can go to the enchant tab and say I want to enchant my boots. I can then choose which one of these modifiers I'd like to re-roll. So say I want to get rid of the poison rest. I can then click enchant, which will cost me a crafting material, which you get from salvaging gear or dropping it, and then it's going to cost me some gold. The problem with this is that unlike Diablo 3, which I would be able to click on a little button which gave me a list of the different possible outcomes, I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm not sure if this is a beta thing or if this is something that will actually be the way they play it. If this is the case, though, it means that everyone's going to feel more forced to go out of the game, go to a third-party tool to see the list of mods that can roll. In this case, I can look at this and I'll see that, hey, I can get the poison rest can then be replaced with intelligence, which is actually beneficial for me. And now I have this. Now I can re-roll the enchant, but it will only be able to re-roll the crafted enchanted modifier, which is exactly like it was back in D3. Outside of that, there's a bunch of other mechanics and stuff that I've been unable to try because of the limitations in the beta. I do want to point out that there were quite a few server issues. However, this was to be expected. Thank you, Tal, for the 28 months, man. Appreciate that, dude.
How goes it?
Very well. A couple of other minor things I want to get them out of the way is the minimap. Now, I'm a person that is a Vivid ARPG fan. I love having a minimap overlay on top of the entire screen with a low opacity as I'm playing an ARPG game and blasting hack and slash monsters. However, this is what I got instead. This is, to me, more of an MMO-like map where I can just click the map up with the tab or the M key and then clicking on the portals. If I want to teleport somewhere, I can do so here by teleporting to these areas. Or I can just take it down and I have a mini-map on the side of the corner. This is not very ARPG-like for me. My taste, a little bit of a buggy issue. Well, not buggy, but it's bugging me. Another thing to point out is the force left click to move. In the control section, you are able to remove the combine, move, interact, and basic skill slot. If you don't have this enabled, it will be similar to D3, where your left click is interacting. It's also using one of your basic skills, and it's also using to move, loot, and interact in general. If you disable this, all of these things is going to be separated in each unique keybind. I don't know what's worse, trying to dodge or get out of a pack of enemies or change my positioning to then accidentally start attacking because I clicked on an enemy, or if I have to do this where I have an item on the ground, but if I left click it I can't loot it. Instead I have to hover over it and then use my interact key, which in my case is the F key. That means to loot I now have to hover over the item and use my keyboard to loot it with another key. I don't know if I find that more annoying or if I find it annoying to get stuck in combat with having a skill on my left click. Either way, the solution is dog shit. End of story. Moving on to the next topic. The point is that the lack of content for showing how builds will feel in the end game is connected to the level cap limitations like we tackled. However, I do want to say that party play felt really, really, really good. Party play in general, I was actually playing with some people from the US West servers, and I had about 200 ping, and there was no problems for me. I didn't really have that many issues outside of the generic server issues, such as disconnections, long queue times, and those aspects, but lag or any sort of delay was mostly noticeable when a party member would throw out loot for me to loot. Then it would take me that extra 0.2 seconds before I even saw the item on the ground. Outside of that, I really didn't feel many impacts of the higher ping, so it was very smooth for me to play with people further away on the planet. So I'd say the party play was very comfortable and very enjoyable to do for sure. Quests felt very MMO-like. Something I want to talk about real quick was the quest log. I can't do these quests because they're gated on the beta access. There's a lot of side quests which allows you to get progression for certain aspects of the game, such as you're standing with this specific area. In this time we're in the Kyovashar area, and that's a really cool way of providing content for the players to dig through and grind out for more boons. And you can go to collections and you can look at the challenges. For example, I believe it was map and then view rewards. So in this area you can then see that you can get renown, and in here I got a skill point for the first one. You get this very easily. The next one I would need another 55 points with, which would give me bonus XP, some gold, and another charge on my potion. And to get this you'll have to do the side quest and progress there, and then these for future ones are locked, and you can get these obols, which is the currency used for gaining the gamble vendor, which is another good way to get unique items, which is very good to enable certain builds through the aspect mechanic. I don't mind this too much. I think it's a really cool way to do it. It's rather new, it's refreshing, I enjoy it, so I don't really have anything negative to say. Quest felt very MMO-like, which is fine. It is an MMO ARPG. There's a lot about that. A lot of them felt very generic and bland. But again, it's just the first act of this game. I'm not going to complain about it. I just wanted to make sure people knew about it because these are my first impressions. The UI feels like dog shit. I want to point that out right now. I'm not happy with it whatsoever. And I'm going to show you the worst part with it, which is something I feel like is rather important to point out. And that is the similar issue other games have, such as Path of Exile, and that is the showcase of debuffs and buffs. So I am going to take an armor shield. In this case, it is the ice armor. And if I enable something like, say, my Hydra, which is a offensive skill, if I click the right key, as you can see, there's no indication for me to know how long this firewall is going to last or my Hydra is going to last, which I'm okay with. They're offensive. You know, when they're down, they're down. I'll summon a new one. That's okay. However, my buff bar I can see here on the bottom left is mana regeneration increase from not taking damage is now showing on the bottom left. What's also shown in the bottom left is then the ice armor. So if I click the ice armor, you can see that it is not a bar, but rather it is an icon. It is a bar that is ticking down the timer here. And that timer is, holy crap, when you're fighting a bunch of monsters and enemies and you're trying to dodge them as you're playing, you're supposed to look at that tiny little bar when it depletes to know when this bubble goes away. The bubble, great. I love the visual display. You can clearly see that you have it. You can clearly see when it disappears. The bar actually goes down as if it was a life pool if it takes damage. It's a really cool display, except for the duration, and that pisses me off. I just don't understand why that's not a different thing. Visually, the game is very pleasing in the way you play it. I don't have any problems at all with how the game is played. Visually or the graphics wise, I think it's really nice. Another thing to point out is obviously itemization, and like I mentioned, the legendaries defines the build very quite a lot. Item modifiers outside of that feels very generic and not really always descriptive, even though I have advanced description modifiers enabled or settings. For example, I was told that Lucky Hit actually provides you with the chance of hitting a secondary time when you trigger that. And then there's other modifiers that allows you to destroy. Lucky Hit is executing. I don't think you have that at the moment. So like a cutting strike on PoE, as you know, if you know those terminologies. Those terms. Another thing to point out is that in the stat gear, there's no display of how much item power you have, which surprised me. I haven't been able to find item power, which is basically the generic description of the level of efficiency you get from your items, such as my gloves having 260 plus 5 from the upgrade, which is 265. I couldn't find where I can see where my item power is, which is kind of weird because of how pressing that specific number is in the game for your character. Outside of that, you have all your currencies that you can check out by going into the material and stats windows. Very much similar to D3 menus and stuff like that, and the interface is very similar to that as well. In general, I'm not a big fan of the interface at all, but it's a matter of personal perspective. Again, just for providing my personal first impressions. Something that is really good, however, that I want to point out outside of the other things I mentioned in this video to round things off, is the experience I had when it comes to bosses. Now, bosses will have their HP up in the top, and as you can see, there will be 3 notches. These 3 notches obviously displays how much percent of the HP of the boss you've actually dropped down. Full bar is 100%, the next bar is then 80, the next bar is 60 or 40, and then it could be down to 0 or 20 and 0 when there are 4 notches, and some of them has only 3, which basically shows you increments of 4. In this case, there are 3 notches, which means that you have 100%, and then there's 50 in here. You have 75% HP and 25% HP and 0 in this specific example. And this is a really cool indicator because every time you reach a notch, it is either a transition into a new phase in the boss fight, or the boss starts using another ability or using an enhanced version of its ability. Basically, the fight gets stronger and stronger the lower the HP of the boss gets. And this is a really cool, simple, non-tutorial needed way of showing and indicating that, hey, you're about to kill this boss now. It's gonna get harder when it reaches these notches. So I actually was very happy with that specifically. And the boss fight is this was the last boss in the first act. If you haven't played the beta and you're watching this, you don't want to get spoiled, skip ahead like about 30 seconds from this point to avoid the spoiler in this fight. So I think this was really cool, graphically really pleasing. I didn't really feel there was any difficulty in terms of the fight in general, but it was a really cool fight. It was an enjoyable fight to do, but those notches really shines through of how cool the fight is. And there's well telegraphed abilities, very much like last Epoch's telegraphed abilities and bosses. It was just very enjoyable to do a boss fight in this game, so I'm very happy with this. It's gonna be fun to see how this game develops in the future act as well. So I don't want to show you all of it if to spoil too many people, but that is my first impressions of Diablo 4 so far. A little disappointed in not having Druid and Necromancer, but we get them next weekend, which I'll definitely be playing. However, as you've noticed, I have a subathon running right now, and that is because I have a fundraising event with this to my daughter, which we're getting very soon, in about a week. So I'm not sure how much I'll be streaming next weekend, but I'll try to be live as much as I can, of course, as I'll be tending to my newborn. So that's going to be pretty fun. But I'll be playing off stream so I can get some content out for you guys. And hopefully Binion's build will feel really good, because that's something I'm very excited about. I don't want to prolong this video any further, so if you like the video, make sure to hit like button, subscribe for more content, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Till then, as always, stay safe, keep rocking.